Hello everyone. In the previous video, I talked about inserting formulas, referencing, and adding comments. Now there are some more complementary topics that we have to talk about. So one of them is empty cells and duplicates. So probably if you ever exported data from some of these online educational platforms like Blackboard, D2L, and Canvas, and so on, right? Then you had some blank cells, right? Let's say, for example, the student or you or whoever was in that class did not submit anything for that assignment, quiz, exam, or so on, and they were left as blank instead of zero. And now that you export this data, let's say in this column C, you want to look at the average of the class or sum of the grades or do any statistics on it, let's say. So what happens here? How does Excel treat these blank cells? So here, if I use the command average, if I say this is equal to average, and this is one of the commands, we're going to look into it with more detail later on, but if I say this is equal to average of all of these numbers, okay, so I grab the whole column with every number in it, and I say, give me the average. It says the average is 5.14. Now, does that include these guys or not? And if it does, what was considered in place of these two blank cells? So if we manually calculate the average, let's just add these numbers together. So that's 15, this is 20, and that's 16, so 36, right? So it is 36, and then divided by what? We have 7 numbers, so it should be like that, and you say it is. But what you realize here is Excel did not consider these two blank points. Consider them as non-existent, not zero. If they were zero, look, if I add a 0 here and a 0 here, then your numbers would change. Why? Because now that same 36 that you had now has to be divided by 9 numbers. 2 of them are 0. So the average would be 4 instead of 514. Okay, so when Excel runs an average command, it does not consider the blank cells. While actually you might say, well, those students did not submit. Their grade is 0. Why don't you consider them? And so you have to treat these empty cells. Okay, you have to treat them. Now, how do you do that? So one of the ways is to find those empty cells and of course fill them with a bunch of zeros one by one manually. But of course, if you have lots of data, several columns, lots of columns, and you have a bunch of these blanks, finding each and every one of them and manually enter a 0 would be time consuming, and you might sometimes miss one of them. So another way is to find them in one single command, and then in another one, just set them all to 0, right? So do it a little bit more systematic and organized. How would you do that? So this is how you treat it. You select all of the data in which you want to find blank cells. Let's say I'm interested in this column, right? Then under the Homes tab, you go here to find and select, and then go to special. And then say what for me? Find for me the blank cells. And then you say okay. And once you do that, it would highlight any cell in that range you selected that is blank. So you see, I got these two. If I selected all of these blanks would be marked. Okay, so let's say I got these two and now I want to enter 0 for both of them. Well, this is what you do. With one of them being with all of them being selected, but the last one is available for entering a formula, just go here and say equal 0. Now, when you say that is equal 0, it is going to make only this guy 0, not the other one. You see? Okay, so although they were both highlighted, but when I say equal, only one of them would be equal to 0. So the other way to go about it is, if you want both of them with one single formula to be applied to both of them or all of them, you say equal to 0, but instead of clicking on enter, you do control enter. If you do control enter, boom, now that formula is applied to all of the highlighted cells. Okay, so just like that, I can find all of these blank cells, insert a 0 or any other number for them, and guess what? Now my average does change. Okay, so to find them and then to change the value of them to anything, including 0, that's what you do. Find and select, go to special, and then select blanks. So this is one thing I wanted you to know. The other thing that is important is unique entries and duplicates. So sometimes you have an array, a list of numbers, and what you are interested in only keeping the unique numbers. Any duplicate of any number, you want to get rid of it, because you have a criterion in your data that I should not have any duplicate number. Okay, so you want to get rid of duplicates. How would you do that? So the way to go about it is you would select the range of the data in which you want to get rid of duplicates. Okay, now whether it's one column or two columns or whatever. So let's say I get both of these, columns G and H. Then under the data tab, you have here, it says remove duplicates, and you click on it, and then it says, do you want me to do it in both columns or you want to exclude one of them? Here you might say, well, just do it in H, exclude G. And if you look here, I have now two number ones, correct? So one of these ones should go away. And then if you look at the rest of the numbers, there is no other duplicate, right? So the only duplicate I have is 2 of 1, so one of them should go. Now let's see what happens. So I say okay, and it says yes, I have found one duplicate. 8 unique values would remain, and look, boom. Did you see that one that was here? Look, that one that was here is gone, and you see how many data I have here? I have 9 data, right? Correct. And one is in cell H9. When I do it, it got rid of that location and shifted up the rest of them. So it's not going to leave that duplicate with blank. It's going to rearrange the column to avoid any blank cells. Okay, so this is managing empty cells and duplicate values, which is important. What else do we have that are quite important? Sorting, making a column into a row, or what we call transposing, and the precision, or the number of decimals, basically. So sometimes you have an array of data, but what you really care is to sort it out from the smallest to largest or largest to smallest. Okay, so you want to put it in order, ascending or descending order. So you select that range of data that you want, and again, under the Home tab, on this right side, you have what? Sort and filter. And there are different ways to do it, but the most common ones are sort from smallest to largest, look, you see? Or you do what? Sort from largest to smallest, like that. So this is about sorting. Now, sometimes you have a column of data or several columns of data, and then you realize that you have to reorganize your Excel sheet. And basically, instead of putting these numbers in a column, you should have put them on a row. So it's like kind of you are rotating your sheet by 90 degrees, or what we call in linear algebra, make it a transpose, correct? So how can you do that? Well, you cannot, of course, physically rotate this sheet by 90 degrees, right? Even if you do, it's not going to change anything. So what you need to do is, here, I get this data, right? And I can either cut them or copy. Let me just copy for the moment. So I do a copy. And then let's say here from F to the right side, I want to create a row with the data from this column. So I want to have the transpose of this on this row number 3. So I right click, and then I have to either do this one, which says transpose, or go here under paste special, and you have the option of transpose over there as well. Okay, and look, you see? I could get these numbers also in a row and make the trend. Now, if I cut it, then if I cut that data, it would be only here, nothing else, right? So instead of copy, I do Control X or cut, and then go and do the paste special here. Let's see. It allows me to. Didn't. Here. Let me get rid of this. So copy, come here. So with copy, you have the paste special. Now, what about the paste? If you have paste, do you still have the paste special? Cut, if you cut. So I right click and cut the data. Come here, right click, and you see it does not give me the paste special. Okay, so if you want to create a transpose, you have to copy, not cut. If you cut it, Control X, it is not going to give you the option to paste a special. That just copy the data. By the way, you're not gonna lose anything, because right now I can just copy this data, let's say, correct? I copy them and I paste a special them here, but now let's see what happens if I delete these guys. Nothing. You see, so it's better to delete the original data because it does not give you that option with cut. Okay, so that's about sorting and transposing. What about precision? So sometimes your data, they have decimals, and they have a bunch of decimals, or they do not have enough of decimals, and what you want is to change the number of decimals or change the precision of the data, right? So let's say here you have this data, and then here you say this column is equal to, let's divide something by these guys. Let's say 5 divided by this, correct? It's gonna have 2 decimals and then go down. And you see, depending on the precision that you want, these data are not all having the same decimals, which is okay. But now maybe you want to add 1 more decimal at least for a data like this, correct? You see here, this is like 6 decimal, 6 decimal, this is 1, this is 3, these whole numbers, you don't need decimals. So maybe this one and this one, you want to also make them 3 decimals. So you click here and then go down and home under general, and then what? You can increment or increase or decrease decimals. So hey, give me 1 0, 1 extra decimal, and here maybe give me 2. Good? And if you want here, now if you apply to a whole number, you see it jumps to 4. And if you do a decrement, then you can go down to 3. So when you apply it to a whole number, it's not going to go up by a factor of 1. It's not going to add 1 0. It adds several zeros. Okay, but you can manage that and reduce it to the number that you want. And let's say here, you also want these guys. So bring them down to 3. Any like that, right? So you can change the number of decimals used to show any number. Good? So you have control over the precision. That's about it. Now, let's look at another thing. Data validation. So sometimes you do not want the user to enter whatever they want in these cells, right? Because these cells are like input command in MATLAB. But it's not going to ask you. It's just going to allow you to type any number that you want, unless you do some, you apply some conditions for entering the numbers, right? Because like, let's say in MATLAB, when you're asking the user to enter a number, you use the command input. you can type a message in that input and say, hey, enter a number that is a whole number and it's between 10 to, let's say, 50. Okay, so at least you give the user an info, a guide to what kind of number, what type of inputs they can enter, they're allowed to enter. But here, you see, there is no comment, there is no info or anything. Of course, you can add a comment if you want, but if I don't apply any condition or validation, I can enter whatever I want. So let's say here, this is your age. Okay, and it asks you to enter your age here. Good. Now, let's say this is for the driving license. So this is a program that is working on getting your info for a driver license. And you know, if you're 12, you cannot apply for a driver license, right? You have to be at least 16. And probably when you are older than 80 or 90, they're not going to allow you to drive anymore, right? As far as I know, it was like 90 years old or so. So your age should be in that range, 16 to 90, and it could or could not be a whole number, okay? Unless it asks you to apply a whole number. But you have some condition. And if the user enters a number that is out of this range, you want to either give them a warning message or shoot an error message and do not let the Excel formulas and everything proceed. So how would you do that? You see here, this is the cell where you're supposed to enter, right? And by the way, one of the next things we're going to talk about is to add a color to a cell, right? So if you want to mark it for the user, hey, this cell, not this one, is where you want to enter, then you can select that cell and then go here to fill with color and put some color in it. So they know at least they have to do it here. If you want, you can even apply a border to it and mark it up with some border so they know you're exactly going to apply it over there. Okay? So we're going to see more about border and color, but I just wanted you to know, if you want to mark it for somebody, to know where they should do it. Now, with this here, right, I go to my data and then go to data validation. And it says, okay, first of all, what kind of style of error do you want to have when the user enters a non-meaningful entry? Do you want them to see an error and say, hey, stop, don't proceed? Do you want them to just get warning, or do you want them to just get info? So let's say here, I say I want them to not proceed. I want them to stop. Now, what do you want? Do you want to allow any value? Do you want to allow whole numbers, decimals, list, date, time, so on and so forth? Let's say I want to allow a decimal, that's okay, but I have conditions on it. Do you want it to be between two numbers, not between numbers, equal, not equal, greater, less than, greater than or equal, or so? So let's say between. What's your minimum? 16. What's your maximum? 90. Okay? And what's your message? I say wrong input. And then what would you provide as the message? That's the title, right? What's the input? Say your age for a driver license has to be between 16 and 90. Okay? So this is what that error message is going to show to the user. Okay? And they say, okay. Now you see, here I have not entered anything, so of course it is giving me an error. But if I go ahead and enter a number, 45, no worries. 45 is a valid number. But if I say no, 15, boom. Not only it shows the error message to you, it throws the error message. Hey, do you want to cancel or retry? And of course, if you retry again with that 15, it is going to throw the error at you again. Or you can cancel it. Okay, so you see, it kept bugging me and asking for a new input until I enter something meaningful. Otherwise, it is not going to let me do anything with it. Now, another way you can proceed it is, if you go back to this data validation, instead of stop, you just give it a warning. Okay? Now, if you enter a wrong data, let's say 95, it's not gonna stop you from doing whatever you wanted to do. It still shows you the error message, but then here it asks you, hey, the data does not match the range. Do you want to continue? So it allows you to continue if for any reason you believe that the criterion applied here is not right. If you say no, well, you have to go and enter the data again. But if you say yes, then it takes it from you and lets you proceed. So that's the difference, right? And info just gives you info, just like when I moved over this cell. That just gives you the info, no warning. So I always recommend put a warning, or better, put an error if you really are rigid about your conditions, right? If you don't really want a what we call garbage input to come in and then garbage output that goes out, right? That's what we say in programming, garbage in, garbage out, GIGO. If you don't want that to happen, make sure you put an error message there. Okay, so that's about data validation. Good.